Commander James "Ghost" Hawkins sat quietly in the corner of First National Bank, his back against the wall and eyes constantly moving. Old habits die hard. Even in a simple place like this, he couldn't help but notice everything. The security guard who checked his phone too often, the cameras that left a blind spot near the restrooms, and the emergency exit with a burnt-out indicator light. The bank was busy today. A young mother tried to keep her toddler from pulling brochures off a display stand. An elderly couple argued softly about their account balance. Two tellers laughed behind the counter about something on their computer screen. Ghost checked his watch. His appointment wasn't for another 15 minutes. After 20 years as a Navy SEAL, 20 years of missions so secret they would never appear in history books, he was finally stepping away. The papers for his retirement fund waited upstairs with a financial advisor who knew nothing about what Ghost had done for his country. Just need to sort out the money stuff, then figure out what normal people do, he thought, rubbing the scar that ran along his forearm. A reminder of that night in Yemen when everything went wrong. The dreams still came most nights, faces of teammates he couldn't save. The village that burned despite their efforts. Decisions made in heartbeats that haunted him years later. His therapist said civilian life might help heal those wounds. Ghost wasn't convinced, but he was willing to try. Something felt off today. Ghost sat up straighter, his senses suddenly alert. 3 men had entered within 5 minutes, each going to different areas of the bank. They didn't look at each other, but something about their movements seemed connected. One kept touching the front of his oversized jacket. Another kept glancing at the guard. The front doors opened again. A tall man in a baseball cap walked in, eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the cloudy day outside. His right hand never left his pocket. He nodded almost imperceptibly to the man standing by the loan application desk. Ghost felt his heart rate slow, his breathing deepen. The familiar calm before action washed over him. He'd felt this focused tranquility in dusty villages, on storm-tossed ships, in mountains where the air was too thin to breathe properly. It was the stillness that had kept him alive when others died. Could be nothing, he told himself. Not everyone is a threat. His therapist had talked about this too, the hypervigilance that made everyday situations feel dangerous. But 20 years of staying alive in the world's deadliest places had taught Ghost to trust his instincts. The tall man checked his watch. The others seemed to shift positions slightly, creating a triangle formation that covered all corners of the bank lobby. Ghost noticed how they positioned themselves near exits, how they seemed to be waiting for something. A red sedan pulled up outside, stopping in the no parking zone right in front of the main doors. The driver didn't get out. Here we go, Ghost thought, slowly slipping his phone into his boot and loosening his shoulders. Whatever was about to happen, he wanted to be ready without looking ready. The bank manager emerged from her office, heading toward the teller stations. The security guard finally put his phone away and started his patrol walk toward the safe deposit box area. The tall man looked at his watch again. Ghost counted silently in his head. The signs were all there, the coordination, the positioning, the timing. He'd seen operations like this before, though usually in places where gunfire was already a daily occurrence, not in quiet suburban banks on Tuesday mornings. 3 customers left, leaving 12 people in the lobby besides the staff and Ghost. The elderly couple finally reached an agreement and headed for the door. 10 civilians now. The man by the loan desk received a text message. Ghost couldn't see the content, but he saw the man's posture change, straightening, focusing like a snake preparing to strike. Ghost took a deep breath. If something was about to happen, he'd need to make quick decisions. Which people needed protection first? What objects could become weapons? Where were the best defensive positions? 20 years of combat flashed through his mind as he waited, perfectly still, watching 4 strangers who didn't know they were being watched by one of the most dangerous men their country had ever produced. The explosion of noise hit first. The front doors of the bank burst open as 3 more men rushed in wearing black ski masks. Glass shattered somewhere. A woman screamed. The tall man Ghost had been watching pulled out a gun and fired twice into the ceiling. Everyone on the ground. Now, he shouted, his voice unnaturally calm. This is a robbery. People dropped to the floor, some crying, others too shocked to make a sound. Ghost lowered himself smoothly, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. His mind worked quickly, counting armed men, 6 total now, and mapping their positions. The leader, the tall man in the baseball cap, moved with military precision. Ghost noticed immediately. This wasn't some desperate drug addict looking for quick cash. This man moved like someone who had seen combat. "You." The leader pointed his gun at a young teller. "Vault access. Now." 2 robbers herded the bank staff together while the others spread out, covering the room. One of them, a stocky man with nervous hands, kicked shut the blinds on the windows. Phones in the center of the room. Ordered another robber, his accent hinting at Eastern European origins. Anyone hiding a phone gets shot. Ghost placed his visible phone on the growing pile in the middle of the floor, keeping his face scared and compliant like the others. His backup phone remained hidden in his boot. The leader, who the others called Viper, continued barking orders. 30 minutes, people. Do exactly what we say, and you'll be telling this story to your grandkids someday. Try to be a hero and... He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Ghost watched how the robbers communicated, hand signals, practiced movements. These weren't random thugs. They had training. Possibly private military or ex-special forces gone bad. The way they secured the room spoke of experience. The security guard made his move then, reaching slowly for his holster. Ghost saw it coming seconds before anyone else. The guard was young, probably underpaid, and about to die for his courage. "Don't," Ghost whispered, but he was too far away. One of the robbers, the jumpy one with the shaky hands, noticed the movement and swung his weapon around. "Gun, he's got a gun." The security guard froze, hand halfway to his weapon. In the split second before disaster, Ghost saw multiple futures branching out. If the guard drew, he'd be shot immediately. If multiple robbers fired, stray bullets might hit civilians. If Ghost intervened now, he'd lose the element of surprise he might need later. Viper moved with shocking speed, crossing the room and pressing his weapon against the guard's forehead. "Bad choice, rent-a-cop. Take the gun out with 2 fingers and slide it over." The guard complied, face pale with fear. Viper picked up the weapon, checked it, and tucked it into his waistband. Then, without warning, he slammed the butt of his own gun against the guard's temple. The young man crumpled to the floor, unconscious but alive. Ghost felt a cold relief. Unconscious was better than dead. The gang was willing to hurt people but hadn't killed anyone yet. That was important information. A woman near Ghost began to sob quietly, clutching her purse. One of the robbers noticed and approached her, weapon pointing. "What's in the bag, lady? Something you don't want to share." Ghost caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod, urging her to comply. She emptied her purse, tissues, makeup, wallet, onto the floor. Meanwhile, at the vault, the bank manager was explaining something to Viper, who looked increasingly angry. "What do you mean time lock?" Viper demanded loud enough for everyone to hear. "The vault has a timed lock system," the manager stammered. "It won't open again until 1:15. Bank policy. I can't override it." Viper grabbed the manager by the collar. "You have 5 minutes to figure it out or things get ugly." Ghost processed this new information. Time lock meant delay. Delay meant the police would have time to surround the building. The robbers' perfect plan was already falling apart, which made them more dangerous. He studied each robber in turn, noting weaknesses. The jumpy one with shaky hands. Another who kept touching his neck, a nervous tick. The third who limped slightly on his left leg. Ghost stored these details away. When the moment came to act, he would need every advantage. For now, he remained still, looking as frightened as anyone else in the room, just another hostage on the floor. But he wasn't, and soon they would all find out exactly what kind of man they had trapped in there with them. 15 minutes into the robbery, the atmosphere in the bank had shifted. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a heavy dread, as everyone realized this wasn't going to end quickly. Ghost watched the robbers grow more agitated. The one they called Dreads paced near the front windows, occasionally peeking through the closed blinds. Outside, police sirens wailed closer. "They're setting up a perimeter," Dreads called to Viper. "Spotted 2 tactical units." Viper cursed under his breath. "Stick to the plan. We've got time." but Ghost could hear the tension in his voice. Whatever their original timeline had been, it was now compressed. The hostages remained face down on the cold marble floor. An older man had begun wheezing, his breathing labored. Next to Ghost, a young woman trembled uncontrollably, tears silently streaming down her face. "Stay calm." Ghost whispered to her without moving his lips. "Breathe slowly." The woman glanced at him, surprised by his steady voice. She gave a tiny nod and tried to control her breathing. Viper stalked over to the bank manager, who was still trying to explain why the vault couldn't be opened early. "Your security system is impressive," Viper said, his voice eerily conversational. "But we came prepared." He nodded to another robber, a bulky man with a distinctive tattoo peeking from under his sleeve. The man pulled out a small electronic device and headed toward the vault area. Ghost recognized military-grade equipment when he saw it. This wasn't local talent. These men had resources and connections, the kind that came from private military contractors or worse. The nervous robber who'd almost shot the security guard earlier, the one the others called Tick, kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, gun swinging dangerously in his grip. "They're going to start calling soon," Tick said, eyes darting around. "We should just take what we have and go." "Shut up," Viper hissed. "We stick to the plan." Ghost filed away this bit of tension. Division among the robbers could create opportunities. He made another careful scan of the room, noting potential weapons, a heavy stapler on a desk, a letter opener partially hidden under fallen papers, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. The phone at the customer service desk rang, making everyone jump. Viper nodded to Dreads, who answered it and then held it out. "Police negotiator," he said. Viper took the phone. "Listen carefully," he said into the receiver. "We have 15 hostages. We want a helicopter on the roof in 1 hour and clear passage to the airport. No tricks." He listened for a moment, then laughed without humor. "That's not how this works. You have 1 hour, or we start making examples." The mother with the toddler stifled a sob at those words. Her child, remarkably quiet until now, began to fuss. The sound drew Tick's attention, his agitated movements becoming more erratic as he approached them. "Shut that kid up," he snapped, pointing his weapon in their direction. Ghost tensed, ready to move. The mother clutched her child tighter, trying desperately to quiet the toddler who was now on the verge of a full meltdown. "I said shut it up." Tick's finger tightened on the trigger guard. Ghost made a decision. He coughed loudly, dramatically, drawing Tick's attention away from the mother and child. "Sorry," Ghost wheezed, playing up his distress. "Asthma." Tick swung toward him, momentarily distracted. "You got medicine or something? Take it. We don't need you dying on us." Ghost nodded gratefully, slowly reaching into his pocket as if for an inhaler. The motion let him shift his position slightly, putting himself between Tick and the mother. Viper finished his call and noticed the commotion. "Problem." "Just this guy having trouble breathing," Tick answered. Viper studied Ghost for the first time, really looking at him. For a brief moment, Ghost thought he saw a flicker of recognition in the leader's eyes. Had they crossed paths before? In what shadow war or classified operation? "You," Viper said, pointing at Ghost. "What's your name?" "Jim." Ghost replied simply, using his common nickname rather than his full name or call sign. "Jim Hawkins." Viper stared at him a moment longer, then turned away. "Keep an eye on that one," he muttered to Dreads. "Something about him feels off." Ghost kept his expression neutral, but inwardly he knew his window of anonymous advantage was closing. They hadn't placed him yet, but Viper's instincts were good. It wouldn't be long before they realized exactly who they had trapped in the bank with them. And when that happened, Ghost would need to be ready to move. The bank's overhead lights flickered briefly as Ghost heard the distant thump of a generator kicking in. The police had cut the main power, but the bank's backup systems were responding. Standard procedure for a hostage situation. He'd been on the other side of these scenarios before, planning entry points and extraction routes. Now he was on the inside, watching the minute hand of the wall clock tick forward. 45 minutes had passed since the robbery began. Outside, he could hear the faint sound of police bullhorns, too distant to make out the words. Viper paced near the vault where his tech guy was still working on bypassing the time lock. The device they'd brought was sophisticated, military-grade or better, but the bank's security was proving stubborn. How much longer? Viper demanded. 20 minutes, maybe less, the tech answered, not looking up from his work. This system has redundancies I didn't expect. Ghost used their distraction to slowly shift his position on the floor, inch by inch, until he was closer to the customer service desk. From here, he could see under the desk where a metal letter opener had fallen during the initial chaos. It wasn't much, but in the right hands, it could be effective. Dredd stood guard near the front door, periodically checking the street through gaps in the blinds. "They've got snipers on the roof across the street," he reported. "SWAT team at the corner." "They can't do anything while we have hostages," Viper replied confidently. Ghost knew better. If the police believed the hostages were in immediate danger, they would storm the building. Right now, they were following the playbook: contain, negotiate, wait. But that could change quickly. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair, was sitting against the wall with the other employees. Her face was pale but composed. Ghost caught her eye and gave her a questioning look, then glanced supply toward the ceiling. She frowned slightly, then understanding dawned. She gave the tiniest nod toward a corner of the room. Ghost followed her gaze to a ceiling panel that looked slightly different from the others. Probably an access point to the ducting or electrical system. Good to know. Tick was getting more agitated, checking his watch repeatedly. "We're off schedule," he muttered. "Way off schedule." "Shut up about the schedule," snapped another robber, this one with a distinctive limp. "Plans change." "Not this much," Tick insisted. "We should abort. Take what cash we have and—" "And what?" Viper interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. "Walk through the dozen police outside. Fly away. The plan works or none of us leaves." The tension among the robbers was growing. Ghost knew from experience that stress could make trained men make mistakes or become more dangerous. The young woman next to Ghost, the one he'd helped calm earlier, whispered so quietly he almost missed it. "Are we going to die here?" "No." Ghost whispered back, keeping his lips still. "Not today." "How can you be sure?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. Ghost didn't answer immediately. He was watching Viper, who had moved to check on the progress at the vault again. "Because I won't let that happen," he finally said. The woman looked at him strangely, noticing something in his voice or his eyes that set him apart from the other frightened hostages. The bank phone rang again. Viper grabbed it, listened, then slammed it down. "They're stalling," he told his crew. "They think we'll get tired or sloppy." "Or desperate," added the limping robber. Viper's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the hostages. "Maybe we need to show them we're serious." Ghost tensed, ready to move if necessary. But Viper wasn't looking at any specific hostage. He was thinking, calculating. "You," Viper pointed at Ghost. "Stand up." Ghost complied slowly, keeping his hands visible, his posture deliberately non-threatening. Every muscle in his body was coiled and ready, but he maintained the appearance of an ordinary, frightened bank customer. "You military?" Viper asked bluntly. Several of the hostages looked up in surprise. "Used to be," Ghost admitted, seeing no point in denying what Viper had clearly noticed in his bearing or behavior. "Long time ago. Desk job mostly." Viper studied him skeptically. "What branch?" "Navy." Ghost replied simply. Something flickered across Viper's face. Recognition? Suspicion. Then it was gone. "Perfect," Viper said. "You're going to deliver a message to our friends outside." He gestured for one of his men to bring over a piece of paper with demands written on it. Ghost took it carefully, mind racing through possibilities. Being sent outside could mean freedom, but it would also mean leaving the other hostages behind with these increasingly unstable robbers. "Tell them they have 30 minutes to get us that helicopter," Viper instructed, "or we start shooting hostages." Ghost nodded, taking the paper. As he moved toward the door under Dredd's watchful eye, he made rapid calculations. Once outside, he could give the police valuable information about the robbers' positions, weapons, and the layout inside. But leaving now meant abandoning the civilians to men who were growing more desperate by the minute. As Dredds opened the door to push him out, Ghost made his decision. Whatever happened next would change everything. Ghost stepped outside the bank, blinking in the bright afternoon sunlight. Police cars formed a barrier around the building, their lights flashing silently. Officers in tactical gear crouched behind vehicles, weapons trained on the bank entrance. In the distance, news vans were setting up, hungry for the story unfolding. A police officer with a megaphone called out, "Walk slowly toward us with your hands up." Ghost complied, moving forward steadily. His mind wasn't on his own safety, but on what he left behind, 14 terrified people at the mercy of increasingly desperate men. He'd made his choice in those final seconds inside. Now he had to make it count. 2 officers approached cautiously, one covering while the other patted him down. "Are you hurt?" the female officer asked, guiding him toward the command post. "I'm fine," Ghost replied. "But the people inside won't be for long." The police chief, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair, met him at the mobile command center. "I'm Chief Reynolds. We need everything you can tell us about in there." Ghost handed over the paper with the robbers' demands. "They want a helicopter in 30 minutes. They're getting nervous." "How many hostages?" the chief asked. 14, Ghost replied, including a child and an elderly man having breathing problems. The chief nodded grimly. "And the robbers?" 6 men, military training, well armed, Ghost said. "Their leader goes by Viper. He's dangerous, calm under pressure, thinks fast. They have explosives." The negotiator, a woman in plain clothes, looked up from her notes. "You noticed a lot in there." Ghost shrugged, downplaying his observations. "I was in the Navy. You pick things up." "We need a layout of the building," the chief said, spreading out a blueprint on the table. "Can you mark where everyone is positioned?" Ghost leaned over the blueprint, marking locations with a red pen. "Viper stays mostly here, near the vault. They have someone working on the time lock. 2 guards at the front, one watching the back door, one roaming." He marked each position carefully. "What about the hostages?" "Here in the main area. They're scared but holding up." The negotiator studied him carefully. "They sent you out with their demands. Why you?" Ghost met her gaze steadily. "Viper figured out I had military background. Thought I'd deliver the message clearly." What he didn't say was what had happened in those final moments before leaving. As Dreads had opened the door, Ghost had whispered to him, "I'll be back." The robber had looked confused, but Ghost had already stepped outside. "We need to know what you're planning to do," the chief said, noticing the set of Ghost's jaw. "You've got hostage negotiation protocols," Ghost replied. "Follow them. Keep Viper talking." "And what will you be doing?" the negotiator asked sharply. "I'm going back in," Ghost said simply. The chief stared at him. "That's not happening. We have tactical teams preparing for worst-case scenarios." "Your teams will get those people killed," Ghost countered. "These aren't ordinary bank robbers. They're ex-military. They've planned for SWAT tactics." "And you think you can do better?" the chief asked skeptically. For the first time, Ghost allowed a glimpse of his true self to show. "Chief, I spent 20 years doing things that don't exist in any record books. I've extracted hostages from warlords and terrorists under worse conditions than this. Those people in there need someone on the inside when things go bad." The negotiator exchanged glances with the chief. "Who exactly are you?" Ghost ignored the question. "The mother with the child. Her name is Lisa. She works at the bookstore downtown, and her kid is about to turn 3. The old man having breathing issues is a retired teacher who feeds birds in the park every morning. They're real people, not acceptable losses." He pointed to a spot on the blueprint. "There's a security entrance here, connected to the ventilation system. I can get in without being seen." "This is insane," the chief protested. "I can't authorize a civilian tow." "I'm not asking for authorization," Ghost interrupted. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. Keep Viper distracted. I'll handle the rest." Before they could object further, Ghost was already moving away from the command center, his mind shifting fully into the state that had kept him alive through dozens of impossible missions. These bank robbers had no idea what was coming for them. The ventilation shaft was tighter than Ghost had expected. Dust filled his nostrils as he crawled silently through the narrow space, guided by the building plans he'd memorized in those brief minutes at the police command center. Sweat trickled down his back as he moved inch by inch, careful not to make a sound that might alert the robbers below. Inside the bank, tension had reached a breaking point. Through the metal grating, Ghost could see Viper pacing, checking his watch every few seconds. The deadline for the helicopter was approaching, and everyone knew the police wouldn't deliver. "Call from outside," Dreads announced, holding out the bank phone. Viper snatched it. "Where's my helicopter?" he demanded. His face darkened as he listened. "More time?" "You've had plenty of time." He slammed down the phone and turned to his crew. "They're stalling." Ghost paused above a supply closet, carefully removing the vent cover. This was the moment everything would change. He'd spent his career training for situations just like this, moving invisibly, striking decisively. Only this time, there was no team backing him up. Just one man against 6 armed robbers. He lowered himself silently into the closet, feet touching the floor without a sound. Through the thin door, he could hear Viper shouting at the hostages. "Looks like your police friends don't care about your lives," Viper announced. "So now we need to show them we're serious." Ghost heard a woman cry out in fear. It was time to move. He'd stolen a tactical earpiece from the police command center before slipping away. Now he pressed it into his ear. "This is Ghost," he whispered. "I'm inside. Northeast supply closet. Be ready to move when things start happening." "You shouldn't be in there," came the chief's angry response. "Pull out now." Ghost ignored him. "Have medical standing by. Things are about to get messy." In the main room, Viper had grabbed the bank manager, pulling her to her feet. "You're going to be our example," he told her coldly. Ghost eased the closet door open a crack. He could see everything now: the frightened hostages, the manager trembling in Viper's grip, the positions of all 6 robbers. Most importantly, he could see that the jumpy one, Tick, had wandered closer to Ghost's hiding spot, separated from the others. It was the opening he needed. Ghost silently opened the door wider and reached out, clamping one hand over Tick's mouth, while the other applied precise pressure to the side of his neck. Tick struggled for just seconds before going limp. Ghost dragged him into the closet, quickly securing him with zip ties he'd taken from the police. 1 down, 5 to go. "Tick, check the back again," Viper called out, still holding the manager. When no answer came, Viper frowned. "Tick." Ghost had already moved from the closet to behind a row of filing cabinets. He'd taken Tick's weapon and radio. Now he pressed the talk button on the radio twice, a signal that would sound normal to the robbers, but would tell them nothing. "Go see what's keeping him," Viper ordered the limping robber. As the man moved toward the closet, Ghost changed positions again, sliding behind a counter. The young woman he'd spoken to earlier spotted him. Her eyes widened, but she quickly looked away, not giving him away. The limping robber found Tick. "Man down," he shouted, reaching for his radio. Ghost didn't give him the chance. Moving with explosive speed, he vaulted over the counter and took the man down with a precise strike to the back of the head. 2 down. But now the element of surprise was gone. "We've got company," Dreads shouted, raising his weapon. The hostages screamed and flattened themselves on the floor as Ghost dove behind a marble column. Bullets chipped away at the stone around him. "It's the Navy guy," Viper realized, pushing the manager away and bringing up his own weapon. "Find him." Ghost touched his earpiece again. "Now would be a good time for a distraction, Chief." Almost immediately, the power went out completely, plunging the bank into darkness. Emergency lights kicked on seconds later, casting eerie shadows across the room. In those few seconds of confusion, Ghost moved again, taking down a third robber with a brutal efficiency that came from years of combat training. The men dropped without making a sound. Half the robbery crew was now out of commission, but the remaining 3, including Viper, were the most dangerous. And now they knew exactly what they were dealing with. "It's just one man," Viper shouted to his remaining crew. "But he's not just anyone. He's a hunter." There was a new edge to his voice, not fear exactly, but recognition. Professional respect from one killer to another. Ghost pressed himself against the wall, catching his breath. The easy part was over. Now came the real test. The bank had become a battleground. Overturned desks and broken glass created a maze of cover and danger zones. Ghost crouched behind a heavy filing cabinet, listening for movement. 3 robbers down, 3 still active, including Viper. The hostages were huddled in the corner, protected by a marble service desk. "I know who you are now," Viper called out, his voice echoing in the large room. "You're not just some Navy pencil pusher. You're one of them. The ghosts. The ones they send when they need something permanent." Ghost remained silent, slowly moving to a new position. Viper was trying to get him to respond, to reveal his location. "We were in the same sandbox once," Viper continued. "Different sides, different paychecks. You were hunting my team in Damascus 6 years ago, weren't you?" The memory clicked into place. A covert operation to eliminate a team of rogue contractors who'd switched sides, selling weapons and intel to the highest bidder. Ghost had been sent to clean up the mess. They'd gotten all but one, the leader, who'd disappeared. Now that leader was here, in a small-town bank, with nothing left to lose. "Your government threw us away," Viper said, bitterness seeping into his voice. "After everything we did for them, this isn't about money anymore. It's about sending a message." Ghost spotted one of the remaining robbers edging around a corner. The man hadn't seen him yet. With practiced precision, Ghost grabbed a broken piece of glass from the floor and sent it skittering across the room in the opposite direction. The robber took the bait, turning toward the sound. Ghost was on him instantly, one hand clamping over his mouth, while the other delivered a precise strike. The man collapsed, unconscious. 4 down. 2 to go. Running out of friends, Viper, Ghost finally spoke, quickly changing positions again. "Still got enough," Viper replied. "And I've got something else too." Ghost peered around a column and saw what Viper meant. Dreads was holding the young mother and her child, using them as shields. The toddler was crying softly, the sound breaking through the tense silence. "Let's make a deal," Viper proposed. "You let us walk out of here, and these two get to see tomorrow." Ghost touched his earpiece. "Chief, he's got a woman and child as shields. Tell your men to stand down." "Copy that," came the response. "What's your play?" Ghost didn't respond. He was calculating distances, angles, timing. He'd been in worse situations with higher stakes. But something about this one felt personal, maybe because for the first time in years, he was fighting on home soil, protecting his own people. "I'm waiting for an answer," Viper called out, growing impatient. Ghost stepped out from behind the column, hands raised, weapon pointed at the ceiling. "Let them go. Take me instead." Viper laughed. "Noble. But I know better than to get within arm's reach of someone like you." "Worth a try," Ghost shrugged. Then, without warning, he dropped the gun and rushed forward. What happened next seemed impossible to the hostages watching. Ghost moved with a speed and precision that didn't seem human. He closed the distance to Dreads, somehow avoiding Viper's shots that exploded chunks of marble from the floor. Ghost's hand shot out, striking Dreads in a way that made his arm spasm and release the child. With his other hand, Ghost pushed the mother clear while his foot swept Dread's legs from under him. The robber crashed to the floor, his weapon clattering away. But Viper was ready. His shot caught Ghost in the shoulder, spinning him around. Ghost dropped to one knee, blood seeping through his shirt. "Should have stayed retired," Viper said, approaching cautiously, weapon trained on Ghost's head. "Who says I didn't?" Ghost replied. Then he revealed the pen he palmed from a desk during his rush, now jammed into Viper's ankle. Viper looked down in shock, his momentary distraction all Ghost needed. One powerful upward strike, and Viper collapsed beside his fallen comrade. The bank fell silent except for the quiet sobs of relieved hostages. Ghost touched his earpiece again. "All clear. Suspects down. Send in medical." Moments later, the bank doors burst open as SWAT teams flooded in, securing the robbers and helping the hostages. Paramedics rushed to treat Ghost's wound, but he waved them toward the elderly man with breathing problems first. The police chief approached, shaking his head in disbelief. "Who are you really?" Ghost smiled tiredly. "Just a guy who came to the bank to fill out retirement paperwork." As they led him outside to an ambulance, the young mother stopped him, her child clinging to her neck. "Thank you," she said simply, tears in her eyes. Ghost nodded once, no words needed. By nightfall, the story was on every news channel. A failed bank robbery, 6 suspects captured, all hostages saved. But none mentioned the quiet hero who disappeared from the hospital before reporters could interview him. 3 days later, Ghost returned to the bank and finally completed his retirement paperwork. The manager, still sporting bruises from her ordeal, personally handled his account. "Planning to relax now?" she asked. Ghost looked out the window at the peaceful town he'd helped protect. "That was the idea," he said. "We'll see how it goes."